What's up everybody, Chris from Full Steam Designs. I finally finished building this kitchen island. This was a huge project. It was really intimidating for me. This is the first cabinet I've ever built. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through my design process, how I built and painted the carcass, and how I installed and finished this butcher block top. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get to work. I really had no idea where to even begin with this project. I watched a ton of videos, read a couple books, and was still struggling. I decided to jump into Fusion 360 and just start drawing stuff up. If you're not familiar with the program, sketching out your design on paper will be a huge help. I started drawing the side panels and worked from there. I'll put these drawings up for free on my website for anyone who needs help getting started with a cabinet project. They may not be exactly what you plan to build, but I think they'll be helpful to anyone who is as lost as I was. I figured the side panels were a good place to start, so I started ripping down my plywood sheets with my track saw. I made sure to get two sides that were perfectly square to one another and left about an inch in both directions to cut off on the table saw. I'm cutting these side panels to 23¼ by 31½ inches. This seems to be a typical cabinet size and would work perfect for me based off the dimensions of my dishwasher. Once the face frame and butcher block top are installed, the cabinet will be 36 inches tall and 24 inches deep. Next, I cut a bunch of 2 and 4 inch strips to use for various toe kicks and cross braces. I made a bunch of extra ones that can be used for future cabinet projects, and I cut them to length on the miter saw as I need them. Now I need to cut out my toe kicks. Most people seem to go with a 4x4 or 4x3 inch one, but I went with a 3 by 1.75 inch based off my dishwasher. That's without the face frame. I made this marking template and used a jigsaw to cut out each piece. Finally, I can cut down the larger panels for the carcass. I did my best to keep stuff organized. This will be key when it comes time to cut the dados, as each panel is different. The pieces to the right are extra side panels for the rest of the cabinets I'll be building. Speaking of dados, I decided to do this with my bench-mounted router. I ordered router bits specifically designed for plywood, so the size of the groove is right. I'll put a link in the description for all the specialty tools I'm using on this project. Some of these are stop dados, which means they don't continue all the way through the panel. I either started or finished these cuts in a previous dado. I decided to buy a Craig Foreman to help with cutting all of the pocket holes for this project. I have a lot of cabinets to build, so this thing will quickly pay for itself in time saved. Just one warning, this thing is addictive. I got a little carried away and put a ton of pocket holes in everything. I ended up using less than half. If you decide to invest in one of these, make sure you use dust collection. It makes a big mess in a hurry. Now that all of the pieces are ready, I can start assembling them. This probably could have been built as one single cabinet, but it was easier for me to wrap my head around this design and move everything by myself. I used 1¼ inch pocket hole screws and either Titebond Quick and Thick or clear Gorilla Glue. The Gorilla Glue will work on any of the pre-finished plywood surfaces. It needs moisture to cure properly. You'll see me wiping some of the faces down with a damp rag before applying it. These pocket hole clamps help a lot with assembly. I made a mistake when laying out the dados for the shelf that goes under the sink. My measurement of the sink was slightly off, and it didn't help that the sink isn't perfectly squared. Make sure you set your sink on a flat surface and measure up from there so you can get an accurate reading. My sink ended up being about 1/8 inch taller than the cabinet. I wanted about an 1/8 inch gap between it and the butcher block top, so I added some 1/4 inch plywood to all of the top surfaces of each cabinet. No big deal, I just ended up needing to adjust the height of my face frames to match. I'm glad I waited to cut those until I was done with the carcasses. I was able to get a bunch of strips of this maple that was already surfaced on all 4 sides and dimensioned to 2 by 3/4 of an inch from a local lumber store. It's specifically for cabinet makers and was cheaper than I could have bought pine for from a big box store. Make sure you look into this before buying the materials for your cabinet. They also provided me with all of the pre-finished plywood. This stuff was all really good quality, and they even delivered it to me for free since I bought so much. I ripped a few of the pieces in half for the face frame that was going around the dishwasher. I test fit the face frames and fit them to the sink. I did a separate video on how to do this, so make sure you check it out. I'll put a link in the description. I went ahead and cut the hole for the drain and garbage disposal. The face frames got a coat of primer before spraying them the final color. I was pretty impressed with this Valspar cabinet paint. I'm not a very good painter with an airless spray gun, and later found out that even when applied with a brush and a roller, the surface finish was really nice. I installed the face frames and started attaching the cabinets together. These clamps are really handy. They help get everything into perfect alignment and have a guide on the side to help with drilling the screw holes. This gets your cabinets held together really tight and looking great. I squared up the back and installed some scrap wood spacers to keep everything aligned properly. These sinks are super heavy when full of water, so I installed these braces on each side under the panel that holds the sink. This is a very important step. I glued and screwed them in from the side and top. Even empty, they're pretty heavy, so get some help when you go to drop this thing into place. I ended up installing some strips of scrap wood around the back and sides of the sink to keep it from moving after I got it in just the right spot. My farmhouse sink installation video also covers how to get the perfect fit around the top of your sink, so make sure you check it out. You'd be surprised how uneven these things are. The sides of mine bowed in and the back bowed out slightly. I used a pencil to put marks on the butcher block top and sanded until it was all gone. I started at 80 grit and worked my way to 220. This took a little extra time but gave me a great surface finish that was perfectly flat. I used a trim router to put a slight profile on the edge. For the finish, I decided to go with Maker Brand Simple Finish. It's made of a bunch of natural oils and waxes, has no VOCs, and is easily applied. I used a brush for the first coat, but honestly, it's a lot easier to apply by putting a glove on and just rubbing it on with your hand. I did one coat in the garage and a second a couple days later after getting it installed. It's really durable and best of all, easy to touch up. I'll see how it holds up, but I plan on recoating yearly since it's going to be a high traffic area and will probably get splashed regularly with water. I drilled oversized holes in the cross braces on the cabinets. I installed the bolts part way so I could lift up the front slightly and lay down a heavy bead of pure silicone around the perimeter of the sink. I lowered the butcher block into place and tightened the screws. The oversized holes will allow for any possible wood movement in the butcher block. I installed my faucet and took a minute to stand back and look at how far I had come. This was a big deal for us. This is the first time we've had a working kitchen sink since moving in a couple months ago. I installed the dishwasher and got to work making some supports for the overhang of the butcher block top. From this point forward, I just started designing stuff on the fly. I wasn't sure how I was going to tackle this originally. I had considered legs or corbels, but I think this ended up really bringing everything together. I needed access to the plumbing, so I cut a hole in the center of the back panel. I installed the remaining panels with glue and 23 gauge pin nails and covered the edges with trim. Some of the pieces didn't want to sit flat, so I used screws to help hold them in place better. I made 3 rectangles out of the same trim material. One I attached to the piece that I cut out of the middle of the large back panel. This will be my door to hide the plumbing. I try to wear other makers' shirts as much as I can, and finally got around to getting some of my own made. You can check them out below this video or on my store page. Big thank you to everybody who's already ordered one. I used Bondo to fill any holes and blend the joints together. This stuff dries super hard but still has some flexibility. It pretty much lasts forever. The 1980 Camaro in your backyard may be rotting away, but I bet the Bondo your dad packed into the quarter panel 30 years ago is still solid, even if all the metal around it is gone now. Just a heads up, this stuff smells terrible and the fumes are no good. Make sure you open all doors and windows and use a fan to move the air. A mask wouldn't hurt either. You can use a razor blade to remove any heavy chunks and sand it until smooth. I won't bore you with a ton of painting. It took forever doing it by hand, but looks great. I ended up doing 3 coats, lightly scuffing in between with a gray Scotch-Brite pad. I used a French cleat to hold the false panel in place. It's really easy to remove and blends in perfectly. Now you're probably thinking, hey, what about the doors? I'll be doing a separate video on how I do those so I can make sure I can cover all of the important details. Also, I'm still trying to decide if I should use the tall skinny cabinet for some sort of slide out storage or just have a regular hinge door. Leave a comment down below with what you think I should do there.